A Boeing 737 goes down in China. Its tragic descent left no sign of survivors. A well-known Chinese writer volunteers to fight in Kyiv, but he opts to support a different side of the conflict than Beijing, opposing its apparent support for Russia. China's virus surge is ramping up. A mall goes into full lockdown, leaving shoppers fighting to escape, while Disneyland Shanghai closes its doors, and one farmer's sheep is confiscated for so-called virus testing. An update on what's happening in Tibet. Beijing is tightening its control over the region following a deadly form of protest in recent weeks. That's as students are further separated from their culture. And for those watching our full episode, is China staring down the barrel of a food shortage? Concerns are cropping up as the Russia-Ukraine war rages on, marking uncertainty for China's food supply. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A devastating crash in southern China. A Chinese passenger plane went down Monday morning with 132 people on board. Chinese state-run media reports there were no foreigners on the flight, only Chinese citizens. Right now, there are no signs of survivors.
The accident happened Monday afternoon local time. The downed aircraft was a Boeing 737 operated by China Eastern Airlines. The flight was headed from Kunming City to the southern hub of Guangzhou. The crash site was Wuzhou City in Guangxi Province, about 150 miles outside of Guangzhou. A video on Chinese social media captured the moment the plane went down. Tracking data shows the flight was at its normal cruising altitude of about 30,000 feet when it suddenly went into a deep dive. The crash sparked a massive fire on a local hillside. Hundreds of rescuers, organized by the Guangxi Fire Department, have been on the scene for assistance. Boeing said it's still working to gather more information. The company's stock was down more than 8% in early trading Monday. China Eastern Airlines has set up 9 separate teams to handle the plane's wreckage, including crash investigations and comfort for the passengers' families. The company said the cause of the crash was still under investigation.
According to flight tracking website Flight Radar 24, the plane descended at 31,000 feet per minute, or about 520 feet per second. Witnesses said the plane had already fallen apart before hitting the ground. The Chinese regime's ambassador to the U.S. said China will maintain normal trade relations with Russia. That's as Russia remains under heavy sanctions from the West. The sanctions aim to press Russia's Vladimir Putin to stop his invasion of Ukraine. This Sunday, CBS News asked the Chinese ambassador Qin whether China will send military supplies and weapons to Russia. Qin said Beijing is currently not sending weapons and ammunition to any party, but didn't pledge against doing so. His comment comes as Beijing is under fire for refusing to condemn the invasion. And multiple media outlets reported that the Chinese regime has expressed some openness when Russia asked for military aid. The New York Times reported last month that Chinese officials brushed off American concerns when Washington shared intelligence that Russia was preparing to invade Ukraine. The U.S. asked China to help persuade Russia against the decision, but the Chinese regime turned around and shared American information with Moscow. In the CBS interview, Qin also claimed that Xi Jinping called Putin and asked him to think about resuming peace talks with Ukraine. This seems to differ from an earlier New York Times report. That article quoted U.S. intelligence officers saying that China told Russia not to invade Ukraine until after the Beijing Winter Olympics. Qin also scoffed at calls for Beijing to condemn Russia, saying it won't solve the problem. Foreign fighters from over 52 countries are flocking to Ukraine. They are volunteers who left their countries to help bolster the Ukrainian defense against Russia's invasion. Now, the Ukrainian International Legion has a new member, a so-called third-generation Red from China's communist elites.
I'm at the Ukrainian-Polish border, Medica. I will leave tomorrow to join the Ukrainian International Legion.
Yi Chi-wei recorded this video before he left for Kyiv on March 14th. The 26-year-old was born to be a successor for China's communist elite, as both the son and grandson of Chinese officials. But now he's taking up arms in Ukraine.
If we don't protect Ukrainians today, tomorrow when we love, or even when we ourselves get hurt, who will stand up for us?
According to Radio Free Asia's report, Yi was in the Netherlands with his friends when Russia invaded Ukraine. That's when they decided to buy some supplies to drive to the Polish town of Medyka at the Ukrainian border. But after seeing the refugees at the border, Yi told Radio Free Asia it was hard for him to only volunteer, and he wanted to do more.
You could tell that those people were very helpless. There was no place for the children to sleep. It was super cold. Many were the same age as my daughter, which makes me sad.
Yi Qiwei published his first novel at the age of 14. China's mainstream media labeled him as China's most talented young writer. Yi says his maternal grandfather was a high-ranking Chinese communist official. But in recent years, Yi has become a vocal critic of the Chinese communist regime. That's after his father, a former state-run banking executive, died in 2016. He was jailed as part of communist leader Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. Now, Yi has left a will behind for his family and left for the battlefields of Ukraine.
I'm still scared of fighting, but I think only after you have gone through war, you know what it means, and you won't want it again.
Yi said that what a country's people want is simply a good, peaceful life. He also points out that a nation should protect its people, not the other way around. He criticized Beijing for its propaganda, promoting the so-called national interest in its apparent support of Russia's war, and said national interests are nothing compared to human lives.
For the Chinese people looking for a magical getaway this spring, one normally fun-filled destination is now off limits. The Disneyland theme park in China's most popular city, Shanghai, is closed until further notice. This as the financial hub reported a record daily surge in virus infections on Monday. China has been battling one of its worst outbreaks in 2 years. Shanghai is home to 24 million people. So far, it's avoided a citywide shutdown, but pushed stay-at-home orders instead. Authorities there are closing schools and mass testing residential areas. In some sealed-off districts, some said they weren't told how long they'd have to stay home. In northeastern China's Shenyang city, people in a shopping mall were seen trying to escape on Friday. Some entrances were even damaged by their attempts to leave. But not everyone could escape before the doors closed. Those left behind appear to get more desperate as time went on. One man can be heard in a video clip saying repeatedly, "It's over." But what really happened? Earlier that day, local authorities issued a notice saying they had detected something irregular in one of the shops in the mall, adding that the mall would be shut down for mass virus testing. The notice didn't give specifics. The term irregular usually refers to people who tested positive for the Chinese Communist Party or CCP virus, which causes COVID-19. The term may also refer to objects where traces of the virus were found. On Tuesday, the city will start its third round of virus testing for all residents. This after the second round just finished over the weekend. As China battles a new wave of COVID-19 outbreaks, many affected areas are enforcing mass virus testing, even on animals. But questions are rising over whether some government workers are using the tests on animals as an excuse for something else. A video clip went viral in China last week. In it, a Chinese shepherd complained that the local police and officials took one of his sheep by force, citing COVID-19 testing. He's from a village about 120 miles south of Beijing.
The local police came in a police car. There were 7 or 8 of them in uniform. They took one of my sheep and said the sheep must be tested for COVID-19.
But the police neither left contact information nor returned the sheep. The shepherd said he wasn't sure if they took the sheep to slaughter for food. A few days after the video was published online, the local government admitted that the sheep was taken by a COVID-19 patrol team, adding the person in charge of the village has given $400 to the elderly. But officials said nothing about the sheep. Among the offenders was the head of the village Communist Party branch. To calm the whirlwind of criticism online, the local government announced punishment for some of the patrol team members involved. But the sheep's whereabouts remains a mystery. The southern Chinese city of Shenzhen is adding a new tool to its pandemic control arsenal. Printed on a tiny piece of paper, it's a permit that allows citizens to enter and exit their communities. Called resident passes, it's made up of 3 pieces, marked number 1 to 3, meaning there are 3 pieces per household. Besides the permit itself, there's a new list of rules that go along with it. They include only 1 person can leave the house per household per day. The person leaving the house should return within 2 hours, and residents must show the permit and hand it in after each use. The permit comes with an official seal from local community office to prove authenticity. Next, we'd like to zoom in on a special update requested by one of our viewers. They asked about the situation in Tibet. At the top of the list, Beijing is boosting its efforts to promote the Chinese language in Tibetan schools. The language shift aims to weaken Tibetans' ties to their own culture and promote Chinese culture in its place. After winter break, Tibetan students returned to school, but found that their classes taught only in Chinese. U.S.-based media Radio Free Asia reported that except for classes on the Tibetan language itself, all other subjects like math, science, and the fine arts are all being taught in Chinese. The political ideology of Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping has also become a key theme for instruction. Outside schools, religious centers are also seeing changes. Insiders told Radio Free Asia that the Chinese regime monitored monasteries more strictly this month as compared to last year. It's a tense time for the region, as March 10th marks the anniversary of Tibetans' uprising against Beijing's rule. The boosted surveillance also comes after a Tibetan pop singer staged a deadly protest at the end of February, setting himself on fire in Lhasa, Tibet's capital city. Also in Lhasa, Bitter Winter magazine reports that a prominent Tibetan monk's health is deteriorating in a prison there. That's as a result of torture. He was sentenced to 10 years behind bars last year, accused of promoting what Beijing deems separatism. Tibet's exiled government says he was in prison for peacefully expressing his views on Tibetan issues. Tibet is often called the roof of the world, occupying a vast area of plateaus and mountains, including Mount Everest. 3.6 million people reside in the Tibet Autonomous Region. Settlements there, plus areas around the region, are home to more than 6 million Tibetans and 7.5 million Chinese people. That makes Tibetans the minority in the region, largely thanks to Beijing's policy to move Chinese people to the area. Back in the 50s, the Chinese army occupied Tibet. Since then, Tibetans haven't stopped fighting back against Beijing's communist rule. Marking one of those protests, the March 10th anniversary, is known as Tibetan Uprising Day. On that day in 1959, hundreds of thousands of Tibetans gathered, surrounding the Dalai Lama's residence. The spiritual leader had received an invitation from the Chinese army to attend a theatrical performance. But Tibetans feared he would instead be taken to Beijing and try to prevent him from going. In the conflicts that ensued, the Chinese army used cannons on the protesters. The Dalai Lama was also exiled to India, where he remains to this day. And that's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We are now sharing a shortened version of our program on YouTube. That's after being demonetized for a year. Full episodes can be watched on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up for a 14-day free trial, please click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you tomorrow.